Well, this action from the French dock workers comes amid growing calls for France and other Israeli allies to impose an arms embargo on Israel to pressure Benjamin Netanyahu to end the war. For more on the issue, we can bring in Pieter Wezeman. He's from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's Arms and Military Expenditure program. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. First, just your reaction to this blockade from French dock workers. Is this the kind of action that's productive in promoting peace?
That's a very hard question to answer. I mean, of course, it's a way of showing that people do not agree with the way Israel behaves in Gaza, the way Israel uses weapons and military force in an irresponsible way, which led to the deaths of thousands. And that's, of course, what this whole discussion is about. It's not going to be necessarily making a very big difference in terms of where Israel will get weapons from, which it uses in this war, because this is only only a very small part of what Israel kind of acquires from abroad to be able to sustain the war in Gaza and also in Lebanon.
France's defense minister has said that these parts that are exported by this company in Marseille are then exported by Israel, and they're not actually used by the Israeli army. Do you know if that's true or likely, just given, can you maybe explain what weapons Israel imports versus the weapons that it exports?
I think there might be some truth in that, in the sense that Israel has a thriving arms industry, which not only provides weapons for Israel itself, but also has many customers elsewhere in the world. And so that statement may very well be true, and it may also be true that it is so that Israel doesn't necessarily need those French components for itself, because it can also acquire those weapons from its own arms industry. Or, and this is very important too, it has a very important and reliable ally in the United States, which is willing to supply Israel billions of dollars worth of weapons every year, mostly as aid, and as such is an extremely important player in Israel's access to advanced military equipment.
Given that the U.S. is, as you're saying, the biggest partner that Israel has in terms of weapons, could any blockade have any impact on Israel if it comes from elsewhere, or does it really have to be the U.S. to make any difference?
Any blockade elsewhere, any restrictions or even arms embargo by other states will primarily be symbolic. It is the United States which will have to take action to be able to pressure Israel in changing its behavior in Gaza. If the United States is not behind that, if the United States continues to supply those many different types of arms, which it has supplies already for decades, Israel can continue to do what it is doing right now.
And as we know, the U.S. is the biggest arms exporter to Israel, followed by Germany and then Italy. But what countries import the most Israeli weapons? Who's buying from Israel?
Israel has a very significant arms industry and is exporting to many countries in the world. Important recipients have already since long been countries like India, Azerbaijan, the United States to some extent too, and we talk about certain types of technologies which the Israeli arms industry is particularly good at. But we also see a very steep increase in the demand for Israeli arms in Europe, where the overall demand for arms has, of course, significantly increased in reaction to the Russian threat. And we see the European states then find that Israel can both supply advanced arms and can supply those arms relatively fast. So there is a significant demand in a range of European states for Israeli arms in the past few years.
And if European and other states stopped buying Israeli weapons, how much of an impact might that have on Israel and the war in Gaza?
I think it would have a significant impact on Israel in the sense that the arms industry is quite important for the Israeli economy as a whole. The current figures, as they have been released by the Israeli government just a few days ago, show that arms export make up to about 10% of total export by Israel, and that's quite a significant figure by itself. And the other aspect of this is that in order for Israel to be able to sustain an arms industry, which it needs to have a certain level of, let's say, strategic autonomy, arms exports are very important. It is too expensive for Israel to develop and produce weapons by itself without having a significant customer base abroad, a significant customer base which really kind of helps to create an economy of scale which makes it affordable for Israel to sustain this advanced arms industry. So even though it would not necessarily stop Israel from using arms in Gaza, it would certainly put a significant amount of pressure on Israel.
And just briefly, how likely do you think it is that countries might decide to take that approach?
As it is now, a few countries in the world have actively taken that approach. A few countries which either had already bought Israeli arms or were thinking about doing so have said no to that, or have at least partly restricted their arms imports from Israel. But in the rest of Europe, for example, we don't really see signs that states are willing to stop the contracts which they have already signed, and new contracts are signed also this year, and so there's a lot going on there, which I don't think will stop. And then there are countries like India, which certainly don't have an interest in stopping their arms imports from Israel, because they see themselves that they need those arms in the face of what they perceive as existential or otherwise major threats.
All right, Pieter Wezeman, thank you so much for your insight. Very interesting. That's Pieter Wezeman, again, a senior researcher at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's Arms and Military Expenditure Program.